We move to subpoena the interpreter to come before our committee. I regret that we have to raise this at today's hearing. We have requested a business meeting next week, but that request has been declined. This may be our last opportunity before we go into an extended recess to vote to subpoena the interpreter and find out whether there are any other national security problems that arose from this meeting that the U.S. Congress needs to be aware of. It is our motion that the interpreter be subpoenaed to come and testify in closed session before our committee. And I would like to yield to Mr. Swalwell for the purposes of...
Did you make a motion, or...?
I am making a motion, yes, and I would like to...
This is, as you know, Mr. Schiff, this is a hearing, and the only motion you can make is a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, my motion is that we subpoena the interpreter, that we have her come and testify in closed session. This is an extraordinary remedy, I realize, but then it's extraordinary for the President of the United States to ask all of his senior staff essentially to leave the room and have a private conversation with an adversary, and then in a public conversation disavow his own intelligence agencies and in many respects disavow his own country. Under those extraordinary circumstances, I think this remedy is warranted, and I move that we subpoena the interpreter.
Second.
So the gentleman has made a motion pursuant to the public notice of July 11th, 2018. Today's committee meeting was noticed as a hearing to gather testimony related to China's threat to American government and private sector research and innovation leadership, not the transaction of business. Accordingly, the chair cannot entertain such a request.
Mr. Chairman, I appeal the ruling of the chair and ask for the yeas and nays.
I don't. The chair has not made a ruling, but a denial of recognition. I'll give you 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I appeal the denial of recognition.
The chair has, well, I'll give you an extra 30 seconds, so you have 3 minutes left for your opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, are you refusing to allow a vote on the ruling of the chair?
The gentleman is aware. This time we'll call the committee into recess. Okay, we'll bring the committee back into order, and I will recognize Mr. Schiff for the purpose of making a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Swalwell and I move that the interpreter that was present for the private 2-hour meeting between the President and Vladimir Putin be subpoenaed to appear in closed session before our committee.
The gentleman has a motion to table the gentleman's motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Mr. Chairman, on that I request the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested, and the clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Nunes.
Aye.
Chairman Nunes, aye. Mr. Conaway.
Aye.
Mr. Conaway, aye. Mr. King.
Aye.
Mr. King, aye. Mr. Lobiondo. Aye. Mr. Lobiondo, aye. Mr. Rooney. Mr. Rooney, aye. Ms. Ross-Layton. Ms. Ross-Layton, aye. Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, aye. Dr. Wenstrup. Dr. Wenstrup, aye. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart, aye. Mr. Crawford. Mr. Crawford, aye. Mr. Gowdy. Ms. Stefanik. Ms. Stefanik, aye. Mr. Hurd. Ranking Member Schiff.
No.
Ranking Member Schiff, no. Mr. Himes. No. Mr. Himes, no. Ms. Sewell. Mr. Carson.
No.
Mr. Carson, no. Ms. Spear. Mr. Quigley. Mr. Swalwell.
No.
Mr. Swalwell, no. Mr. Castro. Mr. Castro, no. Mr. Heck. Mr. Heck, no. Mr. Chairman, there are 11 ayes and 6 noes.
All right, so the motion is tabled. I'll recognize Mr. Schiff for the purpose of making an open statement. Mr. Schiff is recognized.